I'm Lisa Diltz. I'm the co-chair of today's ULI Central Florida program along with Curtis Ostratka. And on behalf of the volunteers and the members, we'd like to welcome you. Thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us. I think it's going to be a great event. A little bit about ULI. I know we had the video here, but ULI is the leading voice for cultivating high standards of land use in all its facets, from planning to real estate development. We have 350 members here in Central Florida and over 45,000 members worldwide. I'd like to recognize our management committee and advisory board members. If you serve locally here in a leadership role, please stand up. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. ULI has impactful and educational programming, such as today, throughout the year. Please visit our website for more information about ways to get involved with ULI and about upcoming programs. Also, please mark your calendars. June 2nd and 3rd will be the state summit, and that's in Jacksonville this year. And if you're interested, there is still time to submit an application to be on a product council. If you have no idea what a product council is, that's okay too. Find me at cocktail hour, and I'm happy to tell you more about it. But they will be gathering at the state summit. Behind me here on the board is a list of District Council's annual sponsors that make our program possible. We deeply appreciate the generous support of our annual sponsors. It's actually not behind me, but to my left and right here. I would like to personally thank the ULI Trends Committee for all of their help, their connections, their time, their effort in planning today's event. And that includes, again, Curtis Ostratka, my co-chair, Jeff Reeder, Dory Madison, Becky Wilson, Carmen Rasnick, and Bob Moser. And of course, a very special thank you to Kelly Seif. Without her hard work and all the details and pulling it together, we would not be here. So thank you. Today's conference would also not be possible without the support of our generous event sponsors. And those include Zom Living, which is a major sponsor. Thank you, Trip. Atwell, Reader Communities, RVI Planning and Landscape Architecture, and VHB, and then friend sponsor CompSpring. So we have an incredible lineup of people today, and I could read the bios of each of our speakers, and they would go in excess of 5 minutes. But to get the content to you, we're not going to be able to do that. We do have detailed bios online of every single speaker here today. When I introduce them, it's going to be a really quick introduction of who they are, kind of what they're going to be introducing, but you can find more online. Just in the interest of time, we had to trim it down. It is my pleasure now to introduce our very first speaker, Doug Duncan. He is the Senior Vice President and Chief Economist at Fannie Mae, where he is responsible for forecast and analysis of the economy and housing and mortgage markets. Among his notable awards is being named one of Business Week's 50 most powerful people in real estate. And today he'll be presenting his outlook on market indicators and trends ahead in Central Florida and beyond. Please join me in welcoming Doug to the stage.
Thank you. My mother would appreciate the introduction. Her view is keep it short because when you open your mouth, they'll make up their own mind. She's turning 97 next month, and she told me to go out and try to do something productive, and she has high hopes. So great to be here with you today. The 90% of the questions that I'm getting today is, what about inflation? What does it mean for interest rates? And what's going to happen with house prices? I would say that's about 90% of the questions. So I'll try to give some insights into that. And let me see if I can, that basically says Fannie Mae will deny I was ever here. So this is the theme. Each year we pick a theme as a team, really as a check on ourselves. At the beginning of the year, we follow that theme through the course of the year and ask ourselves, has performance of the economy and housing deviated from what this theme suggests? So the key words in this theme are turn toward, not arrived at, because when you send people home for a year, there are likely to be some sociological changes that won't reveal themselves in new or different behaviors for some time. I'll give you an example. We were having a conversation last night at dinner, and one of the things that I think will happen when people ask the question, will there be a permanent work from home segment to employment that's substantively different from before? I think we're in the early stages of determining that, because if you think about the economics of a company, in order to make a profit, there has to be some difference between the revenue stream and the cost basis. And that cost basis is conditioned in part on the productivity of their workforce. So businesses are going to be determining in the different categories of employment that they have in their business, whether letting people work from home without changing their compensation, because most people were just sent home and they could go anywhere where the cost of living was substantially lower or that kind of thing, but they got to keep their salary. So businesses are starting to think about, am I getting the productivity from this part of our workforce when they're working remotely that validates that pay level? So at the moment, the bargaining power is in the hands of labor, but I would argue over the next 2 or 3 years, there'll be some evaluation of that to determine whether it meets the productivity needs of businesses. So that's an example of many things that I think will be tested out, and why we're saying turning toward as opposed to having arrived at. So you can call me on that. Just don't call my mother. So let me take you through a couple of things to think about. I give you this chart to show you the magnitude of the disruption of the COVID event. So these are the quarterly growth rates of the US economy going all the way back to, what have I got there, 2009? So it gives you a sense of how big the change is on a relative basis from quarter to quarter. And then you see the COVID. It's such a striking difference. There simply are no precedents for that anywhere in US economic history. So you would expect it may generate some results which have no parallel in past economic history. The good news is the 4 or 5 bars after the significant vertical bar are strong, but they also contain the seeds of the inflation that we're seeing today. So this massive stimulus, both fiscal and monetary, has clearly generated some inflationary factors in the US economy. The question is, how high are they going to go? How long are they going to last? And what brings them down? And certainly that's the primary thing that the Federal Reserve is thinking about. What I've shown here is the savings rate. That's the right-hand chart, which is back to where it was pre-pandemic. And on the left-hand chart is the dollars households have on their household balance sheet compared to what the historical trend line would have suggested. So they actually have a lot of cash, but the savings rate, the rate at which we're saving from current income, has come back to normal levels. So there is some powder for spending on household balance sheets, which is some offset to the potential tightening that's going to take place. These are a couple of examples of expenditures that didn't occur, which is why those households have that saving, and it's in the discretionary income category, right? Because those are places we didn't go where people congregate, like concerts and sporting events and restaurants and airplanes and hotels. And of course, that was very damaging to the workers in those spaces. And here we are in a hotel, and I think you can see some trailing effects of that in terms of the services that the hotels are able to provide because of that dramatic drop in their profitability based on the shutdown of many of those facilities. The auto sales are something that gets a lot of attention because used car prices have been a big driver of the increase in inflation because of the supply chain disruption in the microchip space. And I'll ask you, I want to ask you a quiz. This will be a question which will be on the quiz. What is neon gas used for? One of the things is semiconductor production. So 90% of neon gas production and processing takes place in Ukraine. So worth thinking about in terms of supply chains in terms of what's going on and what that might do to the US rate of inflation, given the impact of it through the supply chains to our production processes, right? So this is one of the factors of a globally connected world when there is a sudden change in the geopolitical dynamics. This is going to reverberate for some time. I think people are only starting to discover how key Ukraine is in lots of commodities, whether they're agriculture or non-agricultural. They're in the top 10 of most things that you care about, and they're in the top 2 or 3 in a lot of the things that really matter. So in the construction space, not a surprise to this group, a downturn in the commercial side of things, set aside apartments, which have been extremely strong, but in other spaces, been a downturn, not surprisingly, but an acceleration in the single-family space. We'll talk a lot more about that. I do want to talk for a couple of minutes about employment. So what you see here is what the employment to population ratio. So it's how many people are working out of our total population, and looking at that over time, setting aside whether they're of working age, they're too young, too old. This is the number of people working relative to our total population. What you see was a big drop-off in the 2007 to 9 time period and a very gradual recovery, but not back to where it was at that peak. And then again, you can see the striking impact of the coronavirus on that, and you can see we've partially recovered to where we were, but not all the way. So let me see if I can, this is one that you more typically see cited in the press, which is the workforce participation rate. And one of the statistical tricks you have to watch for economists is, do they use the same data set? This is a different data set. So the previous one was all civilian employment from the ages of 16 to 64. This one, I've truncated it to, whoops, went the wrong, no, I've kept it the same here. This is how many people who would be eligible to work are actually working. And so you can see we've recovered partway to the pre-pandemic level, but not all the way. And the Fed has talked about that a lot over the last few months, although they are now conceding that probably they should consider we're at full employment. Interestingly, if you ask macroeconomists 20 years ago what would be the full unemployment rate, they'd have said 4.5%. We're well under that, and there's still a debate about whether we're at full employment. That's one of the reasons I'm not sure why you listen to macroeconomists. But that's not a career extending comment, so I'll ignore that. So this is the prime labor force participation rate divided. I've done 2 things, as I've truncated it to post-college and pre-boomer near retiring. So this is the period of time which most people are in the labor force working at some point in time. You see 2 really interesting things here, or at least interesting to data geeks. One is that the labor force participation rate of this age of men has been in decline for a very long time period. But it was disguised initially by the increase of women's participation in the workforce. That peaked in 2000, and since then, total workforce participation has been in decline. Then you can see the impact of the virus, and the recovery rate is roughly parallel between both men and women. So the stories about less women coming back to the workforce because of children at home seem not to be true. If you really dig into this, it's not as true as what the headlines in the newspapers would suggest to you. It's not that it's not important, but it is, I think, part of the work at home adjustments have accommodated that and made it less of a significant issue than what some people have thought. I know certainly within Fannie Mae, we've made significant accommodations for those families who have children at home. Then if you divide by college educated versus not college educated, there's a higher percentage of workforce in that discretionary spending category that provide those services that are not college educated, and so not surprisingly, the recovery of employment in that space has been slower, not a shock. So all of that put together, this is just a truncated view of our forecast. The critical issues here are, if you look at our GDP growth expectation, significant slowing from 2021 into 2022, not a surprise, but still above the long-term growth rate potential of the U.S. economy, which is closer to what we'll get to in 2023. Now, this is all conditioned on what the Fed does, and I'm going to go to the Fed in a minute. Unemployment, 4.2, so it's under that 4.5, which 20 years ago we just said was full employment, so we're already beyond that. And the expectation is, because of that stimulus that's still working through its way through the system, we're going to get to something like 3.5% unemployment. Again, dependent on what happens with monetary policy, because fiscal policy has pretty much been removed from the picture. Our forecast does not expect any additional stimulus on the fiscal policy side in this forecast horizon. The core CPI, that's where the action is. 5% during 2021, only a modest downturn to 4.6 in 2022. In 2023, still almost a full percentage point above what the Fed has as their target. So we see the inflation rate staying above the Fed target for at least a 3-year time period. What does that mean for 10-year treasuries, and why aren't they higher? Well, right now, the 10-year treasury is where we suggested it would be for the full year of this year. It's at about 1.9. It was over 2. It was 2.05, I think. And then events in Ukraine have led to a flight to quality into the U.S. Treasury market, which has brought that 10-year down about 15 basis points. So the longer that conflict goes on, the more serious the actual firepower conflict, the more significant that will become for the global economy, not just the U.S. economy. All right, so with that as a takeoff, what's the Fed think about all this? Now, mortgage rates right now are back to where they were, I think, about the end of 2019, or in 2019 anyway, 4% or thereabouts. That obviously is generating some constraint in affordability, particularly for first-time homebuyers, and I'll show you a picture of that in a little bit. But we've run an experiment a couple of times of what happens if the Fed stops buying mortgage-backed securities, or what happens if they tighten the Fed funds target and start running the portfolio off. Chair Powell has been on the board when those two experiments were run, so he's not ignorant of what the impacts could potentially be. So let me take that apart a little bit. Let's start with the fact that the Fed is the single biggest holder on the planet of mortgage-backed securities. They own about 22% of all the outstanding mortgage-backed securities. In their most recent policy statement, they said they would like to hold none. So they have a lot to run off the portfolio. Now, what happens to mortgage-backed securities duration when interest rates rise? They lengthen, right? Because prepayments slow, so those securities stay on your portfolio longer. So rates have gone up. It means that the duration of their mortgage-backed security portfolio has lengthened. The surprise to the market in January that led to the first run-up in the 10-year Treasury was that when the minutes of the December meeting were released, the market was surprised there had been a serious conversation about letting the portfolio run off. That had not been part of the discussion up until that time. Immediately, the 10-year Treasury started to rise, because the market is aware of that holding of mortgage-backed securities on the Fed's portfolio. Then there's been, subsequent to that, a discussion. Governor Loretta Mester from the Cleveland Fed came out and said, we might actually have to think about selling out of that portfolio. That is another piece of new information. Rates have responded to that, recognizing that the Fed is not a policy, they're not an economic buyer, they're a policy buyer. That means they're buying to affect the performance of the market, not the risk-return metrics. When they back out, private investors are going to have to step in, and they are economic buyers, so they're interested in the risk-return characteristics, and the chances are they're going to require higher yields than what the Fed required. So that suggests there'll be a widening of spreads between the 10-year Treasury and the mortgage-backed security yield, and that is what is happening. That spread has been widening out. Now, with that rise in mortgage rates, it's also the case that it's putting profits of mortgage lenders under pressure. That's happening because the rise in rates is lowering the share of outstanding mortgage holders who would be in the money to improve their financial position by refinancing. So we expect that the volume of refinancing business in 2022 will be maybe 60% lower than it was in 2021. So all that is volume that comes out of the running business of mortgage banking companies, which is going to mean they have excess resources. You've started to see layoffs, no surprise. And you're starting to see margin compression in the profit margins of those mortgage companies. So that's a partial offset to that rise in the yields that are being required by mortgage-backed securities investors. Does that, hopefully that makes sense. Does that make sense? I like it when your heads go like this. I have to tell you, the first time I did a live television interview, I'm telling stories, which basically tells you something about my age, but first time I was called to do a live CNN interview, I had never done this. They'd laid off a whole bunch of senior people at the mortgage bankers, and so I asked, do I have to do this? The answer was yes. So how am I going to know if I'm credible? I called my mother, and I said, Mom, do you get CNN? She goes, we get cable in Western Minnesota. And now I'm in trouble with my mother. So I said, well, would you watch this and see, am I credible? So she said, all right, I'll watch. So I do the interview, get back in the taxi, heading back to the office. I said, did you watch it? She said, yes. I said, well, what did you think? She said, your eyebrows are all over the place. I said, what? She said, get control of the eyebrows. I said, well, what about what I said? Oh, I didn't understand any of that, but get control. So, I like it when you shake your head. Yes, I think it makes sense. So, true story. She's still hopeful. So here's the Fed's challenge. The duration of their Treasury portfolio is very short. They have over $3 trillion that will mature in the next 2 years on the Treasury side of their balance sheet, which is much larger than the MBS side. But on the MBS side, it's much longer maturity. So the reason that Loretta Mester said we may have to consider selling out of the MBS portfolio is dependent on what do they want the structure of that portfolio to look like. And their policy statement that they put out said eventually we don't want any mortgage-backed securities on our balance sheet. So what's the market going to be looking for? When the Fed makes their next couple of meetings, which Chair Powell said in their last press conference, we will determine what we will do with the portfolio runoff and reveal information over the next couple of meetings. So now the market is conditioned for them to actually speak to this. Then they're going to have to decide what do they want the balance of treasuries and MBS to be, and how do they want to manage that relationship, and what tools will they use to manage that relationship. It suggests more volatility. At the end of the day, since it's unknown, markets are efficient, but they're not perfect. So they don't get it exactly right, but over the long term, they get it right. So I would expect volatility as the market is trying to understand exactly what the Fed is going to accomplish in the changes in its monetary policy as it tightens for the appreciation of the fact that the public hates inflation. So our surveys of consumers basically say we hate inflation. So that's top of line. So what do we have in our forecast on this? Part of it's guesswork, because in his press conferences, Chair Powell said, we are going to be nimble, meaning we want to retain optionality to change our mind as the data are released. That's a ticket for additional volatility in the market. And the Fed has good reasons. That the attack yesterday or last night on Ukraine is one of those exogenous events that's going to impact market performance. It already has. The 10-year Treasury has come down in response to that. You will expect to see increases in commodity prices in things like energy, which has already happened. Oil passed $100 today in terms of crude. You will expect to see gas prices also be impacted. You will see precious metals be impacted. Costs on those will rise. Agricultural product prices will probably rise, all as a result of this. So these are things that the Fed has to consider. How long will that be the case? Should we act today as though it's going to be in place for 6 months, or will this pass in a 2-week time period? Those are challenges that they're going to face in the conduct of monetary policy. All right, so where does that, these are the spreads. I'm not going to talk about every slide in here, but it's all the background for the story that I'm telling you. So mortgage rates are up. What you are seeing is that affordability is worsening for first-time home buyers. That's going to become more of a constraint. You can see that, that the existing supply is at historic lows. One of my favorite current anecdotes is every realtor in the country has one house to sell. That's basically the supply, is the equal number of existing homes available for sale as there are realtors. So if you sell your house, you can take a break. I guess that's the story there, but it's true. So what do we see? We see the flow of current applications coming through the company. And we see in some different indicators that there's starting to be some stress in first-time home buyers. And one of the things that led to the dramatic increases in price in homes, somewhere about 11 or 12% in 2020, more like 18% in 2021, historic increases in house prices those couple of years. One of the things that led to that was that the supply side of the housing market was already behind. And I don't know if I put my favorite chart in here. Oh, I didn't put my favorite chart in here. I have a favorite chart, and because I'm an economist, so we compare them at cocktail parties. That's why you don't want to go to an economist cocktail party, I gotta tell you. But I said to a couple of people that I was doing an online thing that I'm going to get this put on a T-shirt for my staff and punish them. They actually, somebody in the audience sent me a half a dozen T-shirts with that chart on it, so I actually could have worn it this morning. Just be thankful I didn't. So first-time home buyers, you can see here, if you look at the down payments that they're making are flattening out. The debt-to-income ratio is rising. The LTV, of course, with down payments flattening out, LTV is flattening out. All of these are signs of being able to bring less money to the table when they're qualifying for credit. So we're seeing the share of purchases, which is first-time home buyers, start to fall as a result of this constraint. Part of the reason it was as strong as it was is if you totaled up all the stimulus cash that was sent to households who take a family of 3 who qualified under the caps of all those programs, they'd have saved $11,400, which if you turn that into a 3% down payment is a $380,000 house. So it's not surprising that entry-level house prices were accelerating faster than middle and higher priced homes in every market. So that was part of the fiscal stimulus that's been removed now. And that I showed you that chart that showed the cash balances that are on household checking accounts, which is still well above the pre-pandemic level. More of that is in higher income households, which makes sense because they're the ones that are more prone to the discretionary spending of going to the Super Bowl, going to music concerts, spending more time in hotels and airplanes, and they haven't been doing that. And so that, given that's a discretionary spend, that's showing up on their checking accounts. Hopefully that makes sense as well. So the pattern in Florida is very similar to the national pattern. It's actually a little better than the national pattern, but it's very similar in structure. Not surprisingly, this is U-Haul data about one-way traffic. For example, if you look at what it costs to take a U-Haul from San Jose to Dallas, it's twice what it costs taking that from Dallas to San Jose, which gives you a sense of the flow of population. And not surprisingly, they're flowing to areas where housing costs are lower or tax environment is more favorable and employment has been stronger. Not a surprise in any of that. This basically, if the dot related to your county is below that line, it suggests you're not building houses fast enough to accommodate the increase in population that's taking place in that area. That probably is no surprise to anybody in this room, right? So what's, to finish up, what do we think is going to happen? Well, we think that this year, now one other thing I should tell you about our forecast is by corporate rule, we impose the forward curve from the last business day of the previous month on our monthly update forecast. That's so everybody across the company uses the same interest rate assumptions, so the financial statements have integrity across all the different units of the company for our public reporting purposes. So that there has been a 20 basis point increase in the 10-year Treasury since this forecast was developed. So what it suggests at the risks in this forecast are that it will be, that's my mother. Sorry. I'm getting back at her for all those years, you know. So it suggests that the differentiation between this forecast and what we would expect with the updated forward curve is that the volume numbers would be lower than what's on this forecast. So we have about a 2.5% decline in total home sales. You might say 3.5% to 4% might be more where it's likely to end up, but of course, we don't know what's going to happen in Ukraine. We don't know what the Fed is going to do. We have the Fed raising rates 5 quarter points, in other words, 125 basis points this year, and 4 more increases next year. Because as you can see in our forecast, the earlier forecast I showed, we still think inflation will be running above their target by the end of 2023. Hopefully, they don't tighten into a recession, but we'll see. It's to be revealed. So I know my time is up, so let me finish there, and I'll be around to answer questions. I think I'm getting the hook. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doug. I think I speak for all of us when I say we were happy to call your mom and tell her you did a great job. Thought it was fantastic. Our next speaker is Byron Brooks, and he will be sharing important highlights on the affordable housing and transportation initiatives in Orange County. He serves as the Orange County Administrator and was appointed by Mayor Demings in January 2019. In his role, he's responsible for assisting the mayor in the daily oversight of county operations and services and successfully executing the policy directives of the Board of County Commissioners. He was also recently awarded or announced as one of the 50 most important African Americans in infrastructure by the Journal of Black Innovation. Please join me in welcoming Byron to the stage.
Good afternoon. Pleasure to be here. So I'm going to cover 2 major transformational initiatives that Orange County is undertaking. One is the Transportation Sales Tax Initiative, and other is Housing for All. So I'll try to do justice with these 2 significant initiatives in the 15 minutes, and I may fly through some material, but the intent is just to whet your appetite for more to come. not doing this. All right, here we go. All right, so let me start by noting any conversation about transportation really is more than roads or bridges, buses or sidewalks. This is really a conversation about building a healthier, wealthier community, a community that's more equitable, smarter, and sustainable. And that's what Orange County is endeavoring. That's what Mayor Demings is endeavoring to do. And we want to do it for those who call Orange County home now, as well as those who we're planning for 30 years in the future. So all the elements we see on this chart, you all understand, you know that jobs, the economy, housing, sustainability, they're all interrelated. None can stand alone in and of themselves. You can't be successful unless they are all come together and work together, and they're codependent. So the sum is indeed greater than the parts. In 2020, at the onset of considering a funding solution to meet our transportation needs, Mayor Demings was insistent on a grassroots approach. We would start by listening to the citizens and consumers of transportation services, and this was accomplished by extensive community engagement. Well, here is what our residents told us. Is anyone surprised by the three challenges that you see? Of course, traffic, transit, and bike and ped safety were identified as those current challenges. And as we asked them to identify the top 5 priorities, you note those priorities. Mass transit coming up as number 1. The needs fell into 4 categories. Transit, roadways, which is about building new roads, widening existing roads, improving the conditions of our roads. Safety, which is about conditions we are all too familiar with, the unsettling statistics about our pedestrian safety. And to keep the roads in good conditions, those that we have, get rid of those potholes. So in response to the community needs, the initial concept we began working on in 2020 included plans to significantly improve transit. Today, as we see it today, with the funds currently available to Links, their current budget, Links only is able to provide 7% of its routes with a frequency of 15 minutes or less. So out of those 70+ routes they run, imagine about 5 of them have a frequency of 7% or less. And what's even more startling is that almost half of them have a headway or frequency of an hour or greater. That's the current service level. So the goal was to significantly just flip that, turn this on its head. And it was come up with a plan, solutions that would turn that around, and almost 50% of those routes would move to a headway or frequency of 15 minutes or less, 94% at 30 minutes or better. And then we added other elements to make transit more attractive, more viable. The dollar amount associated with those needs that we identified under the transit component of the plan in 2020 total about $5.6 billion. Really, it ranged from $5.6 billion to $10 billion for what you saw here. This need list is being updated for 2022. Roads was the next area, roadways. So this map shows the current major roads network with the red identifying those roads that are failing. This was in 2020, the model that was done for 2020. So when we move forward to 2040, the model shows that same road network, and as you can see, the red now overwhelms you. And this is based upon if no significant additional revenue or income or resources are made available to our transportation, support our transportation system. The dollar amount associated with that needs list for roadways total approximately $5.4 billion. Which supported a number of improvements, as you see. And again, we're in the process of updating that, along with the municipalities are updating their needs list as well. Safety was the next area identified, and as previously noted, safety was a repeated concerns of our citizens, the residents of Orange County. And so a number of projects were identified that would improve the conditions for pedestrians, bicyclists, and other drivers, motorists, and this total $1.3 billion in that needs list. So for those of you who are keeping tally, running total here, the total amount of needs, transportation needs identified in that 2020 assessment range from about $13.5 billion to $18 billion. As I mentioned previously, these lists are being updated as Mayor Demings advances this conversation with the community for 2022. So I've talked about the needs. Let's talk about how transportation is funded here in our community. Just a quick primer about those sources that are currently legally available to local governments. Gas tax, we're very familiar with gas tax. That's a source that is available to fund transportation improvements. Currently, under the 10 cents that's enacted in Orange County, 10 cents per gallon, 10 pennies on a gallon per gallon, it generates about $45 million for Orange County. The cities, this does not include the city share. There are additional pennies, there are another 6 pennies that can be assessed that the Board of County Commissioners can enact. And if they were to fully enact the gas tax, the pennies available to us, it would generate another $25 million for the county. For the cities, that's about another $11 million. So all total, another penny, the full enactment would generate about $36 additional of gas tax. Impact fees, transportation impact fees specifically, paid on new construction or expansion as well. The Board of County Commissioners adopted a new rate, transportation impact fee rate, last year. That increase was fairly significant, 160% increase in the transportation impact fee rate. So with that new rate in place, we're estimating it would generate approximately another $25 million in the next year's budget of $44 million. Now, this was really just for some comparison purposes, does not account for credits, transportation impact fee credits, the things that a number of you in this audience know very well. The restricted sources, this relates to special projects that are funded by community redevelopment agencies or MSTUs, as well as grants, federal and state grants. In our budget, we use about $24 million to fund various transportation projects. Property tax, this is ad valorem. This is a source that our local residents pay the majority of. It is the amount that substantially borne by our local residents. It would generate one mill in Orange County under a countywide millage generates $161 million annually. So it is a good source, but it is a source that uniquely would be borne by the properties and assessed on the properties here locally. And then sales tax. Sales tax, there are two sources that are legally available to us. This is not our standard. There's already the 6 cents that the state imposes, in which local governments get about a half penny, but this is the penny. This is one of the 2 pennies, be it the infrastructure sales tax or the Charter County sales tax. 1 penny would generate $600 million, roughly $600 million a year. And I'll talk a bit about which source Mayor Demings is pursuing. And then very quickly, just want to touch on the infrastructure bill. In some of the settings to date, there have been questions about the passage of the infrastructure bill, essentially saying, well, won't that take care of the needs? Why do you need to consider other local sources? And so if you wonder that, if it would meet our needs here in Orange County, there are a few things to note. First, I'd say the short answer is no. It isn't sufficient in and of itself to address those needs that we identified in 2020 and the needs we are working on for 2022. And 2 bullet points I would just highlight. One is of the amount that we know has been designated or committed to the state of Florida is $19 billion. Well, that one chart I showed earlier indicated about $18 billion of needs here locally. So when we think about statewide what that would do and think about what percentage of that can we reasonably expect that we could compete for, that's something we've got to compete for this. Now, I think having some local source in place will help us compete for a larger share of those dollars as we're able to offer more on the match. So with respect to the sales tax of the 2, which is the infrastructure sales tax, and then the one that the county is pursuing right now or discussing with the community is the Charter County Regional Transportation System surtax. And that is the source that Mayor Demings believes is most appropriate for our needs, primarily because of that second note about the flexible use. The infrastructure sales tax can only be used for capital. Now, it can be used for more than just transportation. It could be for parks, it could be for schools, it could be for other needs, but it is capital only. The charter county can be used for O&M. And when we think about the significance of transit, which was a key component of our needs in this initiative, you need operators, you need those bus drivers, you need the the drivers, those, you need to keep those in great repair. There's a significant O&M component to it. This source allows for O&M to be covered, but it can only be used for transportation. And then an important note, important point, and a message point that we certainly know will be important to get out is that third bullet about the tourists and those who live outside of Orange County would pay the majority of the sales tax that's collected in Orange County. So on the community re-engagement piece, as I mentioned, in 2020, this was moving along, and then the pandemic hit. Mayor Demings then postponed, put those discussions on hold, on hiatus. And so now he's prepared to, and has announced his intent to bring this forward for discussion, community discussion, and that discussion starts next week. So there'll be a series of open house meetings in each commission district, and the dates and locations are noted. The other means of getting that community, that citizen input is through surveys. So at your table, you see surveys there. And we encourage you, we beg you, we implore you, please fill out the surveys, leave them there at the place and at the table, and we will get them later after this session today. And so I'll very quickly move to housing as the next initiative that is underway and work has been done. These are headlines, all too familiar. We just heard even more about how this, the housing market is being impacted. This particular is focusing on those increases in the rental prices become all too commonplace. We know that it's partly a function of supply has been unable to keep up with demand. The current, I think I saw yesterday, a vacancy report of current vacancy rate at 4.9%. I think that's what Mitchell, at least that's what Mitchell, if it's wrong, you're in trouble here, but 4.9%. But we know it didn't happen overnight. And we saw the buildup of this coming. So in 2019, Mayor Demings created the Housing for All Task Force to address affordable housing in Orange County. The task force delivered a 10-year action plan. And certainly want to pause here for a second to recognize, I'm trying to see if I saw Becky Wilson, but anyway, she's not here. Okay. To recognize Becky, who served on that committee representing ULI on the task force. The task force focused on 4 primary tools and strategies to address affordable housing. This involved removing regulatory barriers in county code, creating new financial resources, targeting areas of access and opportunity, and engaging the community and the housing industry. So the recommended tools and strategies will create a variety of housing types, as well as preserve existing units to provide more Orange County residents with options they can reasonably afford. The action plan primarily focuses on housing that is either affordable or attainable. And as you can see on the slide, the plan proposes 11,000 affordable units created or preserved, with an additional 19,300 units projected to be created. In total, the action plan projects 30,000, over 30,000 new housing units over the next 10 years, making up a third of the 86,000 total units expected to be developed in Orange County. As we work towards creating and preserving affordable and workforce housing and attainable housing, Orange County is using the access and opportunity model, a tool that identifies areas that could be better suited for locating housing based on the area's proximity to public transportation and major employment centers, and availability of community resources and services. Additionally, the model provides incentives and facilitates pilot projects within higher suitability areas that are highlighted, the more focused, intense colors on the screen. They also, a component of it was to also focus on integrating solar and energy efficiency in affordable units to reduce that overall burden on the households. And in December, the County Commission accepted the Housing for All plan. The main recommendations included creating a new financial resource and resources such as establishing the local housing trust fund. Through the trust fund ordinance, the county commission allocated an initial $10 million, plus committed an additional $10 million with an escalator, a 10% escalator each year. So at the end of that 10-year period, it'll be a total of $160 million from the public dollars towards the trust fund. It is intended and is desired to see additional dollars and hopefully leverage those additional private dollars and other sources that will be in play. The Housing for All Action Plan intends to incentivize the production and preservation of affordable and attainable housing for very low, and moderate income households. Private and philanthropic organizations can participate in this, accept those dollars, but we also know the private marketplace is also has conducted several initiatives, and we know of some very successful models that are already in place. The processes are being done through a competitive process through RFPs, and our cycles are designed to complement and leverage existing resources like our CDBG home sale and low-income housing tax credits. So to date, what have we done? The County Commission has allocated nearly $14 million thus far from the Housing Trust Fund for multifamily affordable housing developments that will create approximately 650 new units in the areas of Pine Hills, Apopka, and Rio Grande. And these units are targeted for families, including incentives for serving more very low and extremely low income households. The county also has a surplus lot program, and so far we've executed agreements with 6 nonprofits, donated 27 county-owned properties. We've also put in about a little over $500,000 from the trust fund to assist these agencies in developing those lots for 37 new affordable starter homes. In total, we have over 1,000 new senior and multifamily affordable housing units that are open or under construction. This slide shares a few of the affordable housing ribbon cuttings and groundbreakings that have taken place since the Housing for All Task Force concluded its work, and represents some of those investments, but more to the point, recognizes the partnerships and the work, tremendous work that some of our developers and builders are doing in this community. And last, I'd like to highlight the Universal Park and Resorts Partnership to create affordable housing, and highlight it because this certainly shows the power of the private sector coming to, stepping up to the plate and what they can do. Certainly this happened in part because of the encouragement of Mayor Demings in discussions with them about being an excellent model and getting out and showing the way. So Universal donated 20 acres of land for affordable and workforce housing, and created a nonprofit Universal Orlando Housing for Tomorrow to focus on workforce housing and multimodal transit center. The project will include 1,000 high-quality apartments, 16,000 square feet of retail space. Rents for 750 of the units would be the $400 to $850 a month range. Would have community gardens, water features, wide walkways, and is expected to begin construction in late 2022. Did I make 15 minutes? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Byron. That was great. I'd like to welcome up now Dr. Tiffany Manuel. She's known by many as Dr. T, and she is the president and CEO of The Case Made, which is an organization dedicated to helping leaders powerfully and intentionally make the case for systems change. In this role, she works with hundreds of passionate social change leaders, change makers, and innovators around the United States who are building better, stronger communities that are more diverse, equitable, inclusive. And today she's going to be touching on some of the transportation housing initiatives and how to move that forward.
Thank you, Lisa. So I first just want to say thanks to ULI. I will say that there are very few organizations in our region that throws a party like ULI does. How about that? And this is a really powerful moment in our region, and so I suppose that most of you are here because you recognize that and you believe that. I will say that I'm relatively new to the region. I moved here with my family and I moved my business here 3 years ago because I believe then, what you all probably know, this is a great place to live, work, and play. I think you're probably also all here because you recognize that this is a real inflection point for Orlando as a region. That there's a real opportunity to do some real powerful work in terms of the kinds of investments that we're making across the region to make sure that we strengthen the ability for our families and our communities and our businesses to thrive, but that there are also lots of fault lines if we don't get this right. So my conversation with us today is really going to be brief. I don't have very much to say in the context of a lot of what we're talking about, very specific projects. But what I will say is I work across the country, and I will tell you this, that I don't want us to miss the important work of public will building. That if we don't get that right, if we don't put concerted effort into how we're building the public will around some of these issues, they will backfire very quickly. So I get to be the person, I have to say nationally, that works with lots of regional governments across the country, and usually what happens is this. They put out a technical report that has 60, 80 pages of all the things they want to do and put price tags on them, all the price tags that Byron just talked about, right? $80 million, $20 million, da 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 da. And they go out and they try to talk about that with folks all over the region. And at first, there's a little bit of bump. People are excited about what the possibilities are. And then people get frustrated, right? How many of you have had this happen to you, right? You heard somebody say this. It's crazy what's happening. Oh my God. They're going to diversify the housing stock. They're going to eliminate regulatory barriers to the development of housing. Oh my God, honey, come quick. Let me tell you, the Housing Trust Fund is going to be great. And they're going to use home dollars and CBG dollars, and they're going to build in SHIP dollars. They're going, oh my God, it's crazy what's happening. I'm so excited. We got to tell folks. Said no one ever. Ever. And it's not because we don't have real credible solutions. The list of things that we got here is outstanding. In fact, when the Housing Task Force was just finishing its work, I sort of came in and had a conversation with folks to talk about communications. I said, please don't go out with a lot of negative data about all the things that are wrong and the sky is falling in because nobody can afford to live here and it's awful. Please go out with a message that is aspirational, that people want to lean forward. And thank goodness they did that, right? Housing for all. This is an opportunity for us to make sure that we're building a region that people can live in, where businesses have workers, where schools have teachers, where band leaders, where bands have band leaders, where entrepreneurs can take chances, right? That's the stuff that folks want to talk about because those are the anxieties that the folks at home are concerned about. How many folks are concerned about the education their kids are getting? That's the real concern. Am I going to have a job? My mom or pop is getting older. They can't stay in the house that they're in, and yet there are no options in terms of senior living, and I'm concerned about what to do. I can't afford a nursing home, plus I don't think that's the best option. But what am I going to do with them, right? I'm on a relatively fixed income, right? What am I going to do? And so when you come to the public and you say, oh my God, it's great. We're going to spend $80 million, $20 million, and guess what? It's coming out of your sales taxes. We're going to have impact fees. Right? What's the reaction that we can expect? And so often the work that I do with regions all across the country is help them to articulate the connection between the aspirations people have for their own lives and the benefit of all the really important work that we're doing. Because this work is exactly what ensures that entrepreneurs will be able to take chances, right? That bands have band leaders, that stores have workers, that coffee shops have baristas, right? This is the work that helps us to get there. And yet, if we're not making that connection very clear about people's stake in our success, we risk having it backfire because we risk having them have to make those connections. So my message today is very clear. I say I work all across the country. Usually, right, I'm the one that gets called in when it's really gone bad, it's really gone south, where folks are saying, listen, I care about affordable housing, but I'm a homeowner. I don't need that. I need you to take care of what's going on with the schools. Or, listen, I get it, but, right, I get called in, right, when that has gone in the opposite direction, right, and then they have to sort of back in a way to help people connect. Here's the benefit of where we are in Orlando right now. I don't think that's the conversation, right? The backfire effect that we see in lots of places across the country, and I tell you, I've worked in DC, in Baltimore, in San Francisco, in Chattanooga, in parts of Atlanta, where that is the conversation, where you got wildly outrageous prices for housing, the need for affordable housing, attainable housing, right? Attractive housing, right? New housing is exponential, and yet you got folks saying, I don't want any growth. Stop it. I'm tired of the cranes, right? So our ability at this really important inflection point in Orlando, whether you're a builder, a developer, you got some great new ideas, right? Whatever that is, take the time to step back. This is not just a number of units that we're going to be developing on the southeast quarter of the city. This is not just a transit line that's going to connect this part of the city to that. This is about the connectivity of, right, thinking clearly about how we connect important parts of commerce across our city and what that means for average everyday people. If we don't do that work well, if we don't get really intentional about that at this really important inflection point in terms of what's happening in our whole region, right, we risk igniting tensions that right now really aren't there. So I'm going to say to you very clearly, and I hope that this registers with you as we talk about some of these issues for the rest of the day, that the opportunity to think through all of the technical solutions, great. The opportunity to think about how we scale them is great. The opportunity to network with each other and figure out how we work more collaboratively with each other is great. Don't leave out the public will building part. And let me be clear when I say that, and I'll end by saying this. Community engagement is not public will building, right? Not entirely, right? So engagement means lots of developers. We often go out and we say, we're going to build this. We're going to get community comments. We get even surveys, right? It's the first step of just getting people's sense of like how they think about some of the work and whether or not we got general support. Really important step. Don't miss that. And I'm proud to say that Orlando's done that really well. Second step, how do I make sure that people see their stake in the success of this effort? And lastly, I'll say, what really is exciting to me is getting people excited about the different kinds of options that we're bringing to the table. I was just having a conversation just a second ago about the idea of pocket communities and pocket homes. Just one idea among many in the housing and community development space right now today. But our opportunity is to get people excited about what's possible, not just for the region, right, but for people's lives. And as I'm sure you're interested in that conversation, I'd love to see that grow because I'm incredibly excited about the opportunity to make sure that everybody in this region sees their stake in the success of what we're trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. T. It's great. We now have we have 4 people actually that are going to join me up on stage, and the focus is going to be on housing. Each of them is kind of a quick TED Talk hit session, it's called, and so they'll kind of pass the baton to the one next to them. So I'd like to welcome up stage William Johnston. He's the executive director and founder of the Microlife Institute, and he is going to talk to you about policy and actually a development that he has delivered with microhousing. And then lastly, we'll have Mark Chasen, who's the vice president with Eden Multifamily, a multifamily company that's making big bets on built-for-rent housing.
To continue on the housing of the future. Oh, Mark, it looks like it might be you. I am not Eden.
That's
Mark,
fine.
would you like to go?
You could go first. So, you got can?
Do you want Mark to go?
If it's easier, we can switch.
If it's easier. All right, Mark, take it away. Thank you. That was my TED Talk.
So my name is Mark Chasen. I'm the vice president with Eden Living. Traditionally, Eden Multifamily, still Eden Multifamily, but now transitioning over to the build-to-rent space. I guess it was March 2020, we all remember, everything kind of came to a halt for a second. Is there a way to stop this moving? No? Pause. Yeah. That's okay, it can play through. So the long and short of it, we had several multifamily projects that were, just getting ready to break ground. We were about to close our construction loans, and our good friends over at Wells Fargo and TD Bank and the rest of the infamous construction lenders told us, let's pause the brakes on everything, see where everything goes. At that time we took a step back and said, what's the future of housing going to look like? How can we continue in this business if for whatever reason things don't really come back all the way to normal? and that's when we decided to build Eden Living, which is our build-to-rent platform. There was a decision that we had to make, which was, do we get into the SFR or the BTR space? And I know a lot of people probably think about those two things as one thing. But really, in reality, the SFR space is more of a single-family rental home, which is the traditional D.R. Horton or Lennar product that we see all over the place. What we're doing here at Eden is what we like to call horizontal apartments. So we're not actually really in the single-family space. We're more so just a new product type within the multifamily industry. We build garden style, we build mid-rise, we build high-rise, but now we're building horizontal apartments, or what we're calling build-to-rent. One sec. These are the backyards. Every unit gets its own private space. They're built in cluster configurations where they're either 1, 2, or 3 bedroom units. Take, let's say maybe a garden style unit, slice it after the first floor, separate them. Those are the size units you're getting. Let me go back. Surface parked like a normal garden style community, depending on the size of the project, fully amenitized as such as well, with a leasing office, clubhouse, pool, fitness center, etc. So what I did, I kind of wrote down a couple, high level or granular questions that I thought everyone could kind of benefit from, and then, I'd like to, time permitting, depending on my 10 minutes where we get to, we can open it up to a little bit of a Q&A. So why SFR over multi, and why specifically BTR over SFR? So the single-family style of living allows the renter to, have its own privacy, have their own space, maybe be in a better school district for their children, have the ease of access in and out of their apartment, not have to go up 6 floors of parking, et cetera, et cetera. We got into the BTR space because we didn't want to have to compete with the D.R. Hortons and the Lennars of the world who said they weren't going to get into this space, and then thus obviously have gotten into this space. They have all the widgets in the world to develop at probably 60% of the cost that any other developer can develop to, just because of the sheer volume that they do. Also, we're multifamily guys. We understand the multifamily business, we understand the multifamily industry, and this product type is multifamily. We decided to intertwine, and I'll skip a little ahead here, some 2-story townhouse product into a lot of our communities. For example, our first 2 projects that are under construction now are in Jacksonville and West Melbourne at 265 units and 373 units respectively, of which about 30% of the units are the 2-story townhouse product, where you get your own private garage, your own driveway skirt, as well as a backyard as well. When you think about the financing for these projects, you wonder who is the equity, who is the lender. Also, on the exits, who's buying this stuff. It's really the same thing as any institutional, partner that you might obtain on the garden style, mid-rise or high-rise stuff. For us specifically, we were lucky enough to get a programmatic relationship with Morgan Stanley on the equity, and so far until we hit our cap with Synovus on the lending. So you can really get a good feel for the appetite that the institutional players have for this product type. When it comes to buying, it's really evaluated the same way as any other garden product. Cap rate driven based on rental income, and what we've seen throughout the state so far, and really nationally, is that this stuff is actually trading on a per door premium. Because your competition is much less. So when you think of the possibility of a downturn, instead of competing against thousands of traditional multifamily units, you're only competing against either yourself or whatever other of this product type actually exists in given markets, as well as the slight rental premium that you demand is giving you a higher NOI. When it comes to underwriting, initially we were not underwriting a rental premium for this product type because many of these markets it wasn't proven out in. What we did is we took companies of the like of Next Metro and Christopher Todd, who are national BTR kind of pioneers in this space, and we compared the rents that they were getting in markets where there was other traditional Class A multifamily that was being developed, and we realized that there was about a 15 to a 25% premium on rent. In putting those studies together, we were able to convince our equity partners and lenders that we should be underwriting to maybe a 5-10% premium to be conservative. When it comes to the lease up risk with this product type, it's pretty interesting because the way the delivery of this product happens is you can TCO the units kind of upfront and very quickly. So if you're delivering, call it a pod of 5 at a time, you're essentially pre-leasing the pod and rolling into a lease as you deliver it. So your construction period and your lease up period are pretty much hand in hand. Maybe, be conservative and you underwrite a month or 2 on the back end to an exit right after your construction is over. Like I was saying before, buyers like this stuff because there's minimal competition, at least for now. And although there is a lot of competition on the development side of things, it really is very minimal in comparison to all the, hundreds of thousands of multifamily units that have been developed over, our lifetimes. Getting into the site planning and the development phase of this stuff, one of the bigger questions that a lot of people ask me is what kind of density we can achieve with our product type. And when it really varies municipality to municipality and retention requirements and various other nuances such as setbacks. But with our cluster homes, we can get about 10 units to the acre, given 10% retention, 15% retention factor. But to get up to 12, 13 units an acre in density, that's why we decided to mix in our townhouse product, which allows us to compete with multifamily developers that are chasing sites at, call it a 15 or 16 unit to the acre density. We can pay a little bit of a premium on a per door basis for the land because the rent is a little bit higher and there's a little bit more of a premium on the exit as well. So that's how we're able to get competitive with multifamily developers on sites like that. More so on the zoning side of things regarding municipal education, more and more cities today are starting to become a little bit more familiar with the product type, so it's getting a little bit easier, but at the beginning of our efforts, we had to do a lot of education. We essentially had to explain to the municipalities that either didn't want any more multifamily product, didn't like rental product, preferred the single family home stuff, that we were really providing an alternative for the renter that wanted a single family style of living but didn't want to commit to owning a single family home, and B, couldn't afford it. So, going back to what our friend, our economist, I'm sorry, I forgot his name, Doug. What he was saying is that, people in my generation, there's an issue with affordability and, first-time home buyers where, people are getting into their 30s and starting to have families and they just don't want that traditional multifamily style of living anymore. But, unfortunately, due to the way the market is, they really just cannot afford to purchase a house, or if they can afford to purchase a house, it's not in an area that they desire to live in. On the development side of things, when it comes to costs, we actually made a huge mistake starting this thought process out. We really thought that this was going to be cheaper to build than multifamily, because obviously it's single story, you don't have to reinforce it as much, you don't have to go as deep into the ground. What we quickly realized that it is actually a little bit more expensive, believe it or not, than building traditional garden product. A, because it takes a little longer to develop. The site work is tremendously more intensive. You have a roof on every single unit as opposed to just a roof on the top floor. You don't have as many shared walls, if any at all, and those are really the main reasons why costs, are, I guess, higher. But we were able to find ways where we could get some efficiencies by stubbing out utilities, making the one bedrooms built as duplex units, which I'll show on this plan here. You kind of get an idea. This was one of our early site plans early on that ended up actually becoming a dead deal because the municipality couldn't really understand it. But the duplex units are in the back. They're 1,400 square foot buildings that share a center wall, creating essentially two 700 square foot one bedroom apartments. In the middle, you have a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, which is essentially just a 1-bedroom plus a den, could be utilized as a second bedroom. And on the front, you have a 2-bedroom, 2-bath and a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, all apartment sized, with townhouses kind of intertwining within the community as well. So we find efficiencies with the center walls and adding the townhouses and whatnot as well. When it comes to ancillary income on the actual operations side of things, you can pick up some additional income via valet trash. Somebody, everyone puts their trash outside of their units on certain days. Proximity to the clubhouse is a really big one. Usually in the garden style communities, if it's 10 acres or so, it's not such a big deal. Somebody can kind of walk to the clubhouse pretty easily, but some of our sites are 30 acres and the clubhouse is in the front of the community. So instead of somebody having to walk from, the opposite corner of the community all the way to the clubhouse, or, even drive, which is an inconvenience, and have to park, the units that surround the amenity spaces demand a massive premium because you can walk out of your backyard and essentially onto the pool deck. And that pretty much does it for the high level stuff that I wanted to touch on. And if we have time, maybe no time, sorry everyone. Hope I answered questions that you had in your mind.
Are we ready for the future of housing? I'm going to break the fourth wall. I'm going to make this awkward for the camera crew. So hey everyone, I'm Will Johnston. I'm the executive director of the Microlife Institute, and I have a theater background. So I'm a little bit entertaining while I talk to you about housing. So, is this already moving too, or did I touch it? Oh, cool. But go back one. Can I go back? Oh, there we go. Designing of the future. All right, so before I want to set up some context. I know I got a quick intro. We'll be able to talk later at drinks, but what I do, I am a nonprofit. I want to build stuff that you're kind of like, hey, you know what? I don't know if I really want to put that in my portfolio yet until it's proven. So what we are focusing on is cottage courts, the missing middle housing. We want to build the things that you might not want to yet until you know it will pencil. So maybe you won't admit this. Does anyone join AARP? Anyone? Anyone AARP? You really should. They're an amazing organization, and they don't limit the age members. I'm just letting you know. They want livable communities. So this is from their database and research. So you really need to look at a lot of the stuff that they talk about because they are invested in housing, because the baby boomers are retiring, and they're ready to downsize their way to happiness and get rid of their 3,500 square foot homes. Where are they going to go? No one's building that yet. So, actually kind of talking to this slide, 20% of the actual makeup of the United States is that quintessential four-person family, but yet 80% of American households are not that four-person household. Why are we building products for a household that does not fit that size? So in the 60s, we were building 1,000 square foot homes for 3.5 people, and now we're building 2,500 square foot homes for 2.5 people. Houses are getting bigger, families are getting smaller. What are we gonna do? Again, it just shows you that the housing stock by number of bedrooms. Just look at the fact that 28% of Americans, single individuals living by themselves, and that's the housing stock, their option, if they want to have a smaller household. And then again, you can see the other numbers. But almost 40% is that quintessential 4-bedroom, 2,500, which is the national average right now, square foot house. So obviously, like I mentioned earlier, we are aging. And there's that whole talk that I talk to a lot of seniors. They are ready to stay within their zip code, and they don't want to go to that senior high-rise yet. Where is that product? We talk about housing choice. It's a variety of housing types and sizes, a variety of lot sizes, variety of mobility options other than a car, and it supports a variety of people. So what does it look like? Smaller units, smaller lot sizes. Ooh, scary. Walkable, mobility-rich areas, that experience. We need that third space. Where are people going to go to get their coffee? Where are they going to go to the bar? Where are they going to go to their restaurants and not get in their car? 6% to 10% of the United States is actually walkable, but yet 60+% of Americans want walkable neighborhoods, and yet we're not building them. Why? Everyone seen this chart? Missing middle. We're going to start all the way on the right and go to the left. Not really. Accessory dwelling units, these are great options. How do we add diversity of housing to the mix? Accessory dwelling units is the Swiss Army knife of housing to be able to fit in your backyard. Think intergenerational housing. Think the fact that you can rent it out, reducing gentrification. There's so many reasons why accessory dwelling units are so important to your community, and you should add them. All right, so I'm going to talk about cottage development, kind of expanding on what Mark was just talking about. It's his product, except you can buy it and own it. And so what we did, and I want to talk about, has anyone heard of Ross Chapin? He's out of Seattle, North Washington? No? Bueller? Okay. All right, so this is an amazing book that you should probably invest in. It's only $25 on Amazon, Pocket Neighborhoods. It really just talks about the design patterns of how you can approach pocket neighborhoods, i.e. cottage courts, i.e. garden clusters, whatever you want to call them. They are smaller homes on a smaller lot size around a common area that fosters community. So we decided to build one. And we took it to the next level because we are the Microlife Institute and we decided that we wanted to build a little bit smaller. We consider the micro-built environment 1,000 square feet or smaller. So we built 8 houses on 0.57 acres. Oh my gosh, where do I put my shoes? I've had that so many times. Ladies attack me. I'm like, what am I? I'm like, don't live there. America. So we have this amazing lot, but just to Mark said, it is a complicated lot. It's 0.57 acres. We had to do water catchment. We had to do a really expensive fire truck turnaround. We had to make sure that this is a still attainable, but yet quality product, and we turned it into this. So we have if you look at this, and don't worry, I have more pretty pictures, but what you're looking at is parking off to the side, cottages clustered around a common area. We have a fire pit in the middle, and the idea of fostering community. Usable size front porches. We have all these houses are under 500 square feet. The smallest being the one on your right is 250 square feet. And that house actually was the most sought after. Traveling nurses, people who are just constantly moving. They want to own property, but they don't need that quintessential 2,500 square foot house. That lot that 250 square foot house is on 777 square feet of land. They own their own lot. It is fee simple, and we did traditional mortgages. These are houses. These are just houses, but they are accessory dwelling unit size. This is a terrible drone shot, but you get the picture. The idea of parking is off to the side. We're also facing a huge, what's the word? I was talking to Lisa earlier, but the idea that we are mistaking isolation for privacy. We are in a loneliness epidemic. We are not building to actually be a community. We're not building to actually connect as a community, and thank you to Dr. T for setting that up. The idea of actually talking to your neighbor, borrowing that cup of sugar. This is an investment, and this is why I had 1,500 people on an interest list to buy these 8 houses. They were not interested in the size, they were interested in the fostering idea of fostering community. So people are looking for this. And who lives there, you ask? Well, I have a 24-year-old grad student all the way up to a 61-year-old entrepreneur. We have all races. Yes, they are all single home occupied, but there would be a single family home on that lot that would be a 2,500 to 3,500 square foot house for one family. So again, more beautiful real estate photos. The idea here is I want you to know that what we did was able to work with the community, help change and update the cottage court ordinance, and then they said, hey, do you want to build a pilot project? We said, sure. So we have won national awards, we've won local awards. I am also a member of ULI Atlanta. Sorry. And what we are doing is just showing that you can do this, that there is a desire, there is a market for reducing one's footprint, and the idea of actually building in a smaller footprint. You are more sustainable. You are saving more money on the cost per square, well, not cost per square foot, don't go cost per square foot, because everyone's just like, well, what's the cost per square foot? I'm like, it's $460, and they're just like, oh my. I'm like, it's a 500 square foot house. I still have to put a kitchen and a bathroom in it. It's expensive. So again, I'm just here to say that there are options and there are ways to add to your portfolio. And for the city officials, the government officials, and for you to know, educate yourself. Bring it up in conversations because you can make the difference. You can build a better walkable city by adding different housing types like cottage courts. Again, just wanted to show this, this site again. Pavers and parking off to the side, again, It's that idea of fostering community. I know, but there are tons of different models of scaling this. Think of it, usually the number is between 6 to 12 clusters, and then you go up to 40, 50, 100 acres, but you have clusters of up to 12. You design mini neighborhoods within the larger neighborhood instead of the quintessential cul-de-sac. And the idea is using the design patterns of what Ross Chapin has put forward to allow you to understand how to build that strong community and that strong product that is sought after by those 1,500 people. And so, again, just wanted to show like the layout. Here's the 250. Here's the 495. And I'm not just talking this. I'm not just blowing wind out of my keister. I bought here. I live here. You can come visit me. Seriously, that's what I do. I host tours every month. People can come to my house. You can say, hey, Will, I would like to see this. And then I will invite you over for a drink. So come on over, come on up. We do monthly tours. I have, again, helped ordinances be changed across Georgia, and we're helping it change across the nation. And here's me being attacked by my dog. This is my house on the inside. Yes, I have a washer and dryer. Also, I just wanted to say there's some resources, that pocketneighborhoods.net, that's our main source. We do work with Ross Chapin. We teach developing pocket neighborhoods nationwide. We do it on a Zoom course. We have it online. It's the idea of helping you all have a bigger toolbox so you can add that diversity of into your portfolio. But also, how we normally work is we work with the cities, the municipalities, and say, hey, you guys are saying you want attainable and abundant housing options. What does your zoning say? And usually, it doesn't. It says single family forever. So I'm saying don't get rid of single family. I'm just saying, hey, let's just add to the mix because that would be great. A lot of seniors in my area, a lot of people wanting to start a family or own a home, there's not many options for them. So it's that whole thing of aging in place, allowing people to stay within their zip code, and being able to downsize their way to happiness in an option that, again, is quality built and is exciting for your community. Thank you.
Well, in my next life, I want Will's announcing voice. That was amazing. Thank you all that were part of the housing panel. That was great. We're going to switch gears a little bit. And Dory Madison, who is the founder of Axon 2, is going to be having a conversation with Carrie Burns from the from the Florida's Restaurant and Lodging Association. She is the Central Florida Regional Director. And they're going to talk a little about tourism, where we're at, how COVID has impacted tourism, and the trends to anticipate going forward. And there are some snacks that have been put in the back of the room if anyone's interested and wants to help themselves.
I think we want to stand behind here just so we have some show and tell or something. So Carrie and I are going to talk like this because we need to contrast the energy of Will.
All right, watch out, Will. I also was a drama major, so here we go.
All right, all of the people in this room in our industry suffered greatly through 2008 and those 5 years after. Our industry wreaked havoc. We saw business failures, everything. So here we are, the past 2 years, what industry has suffered the most? Carrie's industry. And you know what? She used to have blonde hair, maybe? I don't know. Did this past 2 years do anything to your hair color?
Yes, I've changed it many times, but my weight has been a challenge during this pandemic.
So anyway, Carrie, besides being an expert at what she does, was the former ULI membership director in DC across the world. And so she knows this organization. And we're just going to have a conversation about what the recovery might look like for the hospitality, lodging, and restaurant industry. So let's start out by asking you the tough question. What will be the most surprising changes in the hotel and restaurant industry in the next few years, in Orlando and maybe statewide?
Yeah, that's a good question. Is everybody okay with me sitting down here?
We can read down.
Okay. What I'm seeing right now and what we're seeing across the industry, specifically with restaurants, is technology is changing, obviously. And now we're actually seeing robot waiters, and we're seeing a lot of automation. You guys have probably seen in a lot of restaurants leading up to the pandemic, you don't have to talk to people anymore to order your food sometimes. It's literally you're at a kiosk, or if you do the drive-up situation, you don't really even have to, like now during the pandemic, you're putting your a little bit. And I think what Will talked about, how we just want to be a community again. But we're definitely seeing automation taking over. And even in the hotel industry, you don't necessarily have to check in the way we used to back in the day. Some of us are a little bit older than some of you, but you don't have to. You can do it on a mobile app. You don't have to talk to anybody anymore. And so we're seeing also with the workforce issues that everyone's hearing about in the hotel and restaurant industry, it's a lot cheaper to invest in technology than to try to get people to come to work, stay working, all the that the workforce has on employers, such as, increased health insurance and a lot of vacation time and sick time. And while those are all wonderful things to have, restaurant owners can't necessarily afford that. And the majority of our members are mom and pop restaurant owners who just need to be able to stay open, keep their business alive.
Wow. Okay, so just as a backdrop, Carrie oversees 1,100 association members that represents 100,000 hotel guest rooms and 5,200 restaurants. So just what's the restaurant world going to look like going forward? Existing ownerships, changing ownership?
Well, and first of all, it's also a joy to represent the restaurant industry because I love to eat. And if you love to eat, this is the right industry to be in. But we're definitely seeing some definite challenges. The National Restaurant Association is reporting that we're gonna lose probably 35% of our restaurants across the country. And that's a big, that would be a big representation here in Central Florida as well. And we have I was talking earlier about one of our restaurateurs who's been in the business for 32 years and has 3 restaurants in Central Florida. But because of inflation and property values or property rents changing and the cost of, any of your supplies, your electric bill, trying to get stuff into your restaurant to even sell, because the costs are increasing so highly, she's now selling her restaurants. She can't afford, after 32 years, to stay in business with all the rising costs. So we're seeing a lot of, and this may be jumping ahead, but we're seeing a lot of influx of people from other states, other investors who are waiting on the sidelines to come in and kind of take over these businesses and put more money into them rather than kind of investing in the people who already own them and know how to run them. That's something that we're seeing for sure affecting the restaurant industry, is that, a lot of people get into the restaurant business because they're really great at cooking. They love to be either a chef or they just really love the art of food. They didn't get into it knowing that this was going to be what would happen to them during the pandemic. So we're seeing a lot of people leaving the industry, which is very sad.
Wow, it is sad. Hotel rooms, I think we're the #1 hotel room market in the country as far as keys. So we have, with Disney coming in and that world building in the 70s and 80s, we have a lot of 70s and 80s hotels who started looking at renovations and, do they need to tear a tower down and whatever they have to do. What are we going to see as far as hotel design and renovation post-pandemic, especially in this market?
We're definitely seeing a lot of renovation happening. If you're familiar with the Caribe Royale Hotel, which I think has been here for 100 years, I'm not sure how long that's been here, down on the Osceola County border, that has just undergone a $185 million renovation. They have done every guest room. They've added a convention center. They have just redone all their food and beverage outlets. And they've even brought in an entirely new staff of people. They unfortunately had to let go of a lot of people during the pandemic. So it's a whole new rebranding for them. And our big flags too, like our Marriotts, our Hiltons, they're all undergoing big renovations and big changes, not only in technology, but in what you have access to in your rooms. If you've been in a hotel room lately, it's like, wow, what's happening with hotel rooms? They're definitely changing. And again, technology is just making everything so much more beautiful. We have this amazing hotel. I know there's somebody here from Tavistock. I think somebody at my table from Tavistock. That beautiful Wave Hotel down in Lake Nona. If you haven't seen it, that's an amazing property. And one of the things that makes it cool is you walk in and there's no like reception desk. It's literally this beautiful open lobby, beautiful furniture, artwork, couches, and you check in on your iPhone, you check in on an iPad, you don't talk to people, but it just makes it, it's such a comforting environment, which makes it so much different than the hotels that I grew up vacationing in as a child in the 70s. It's definitely a different feel. A lot of the smaller hotels too are going under rebranding, refurbishing. We have a lot of small, believe it or not, in Orlando, we have a lot of smaller ownership groups. They're not just the big flag hotels, and they're also spending that money on infrastructure and changing the way people experience hotels now. It's supposed to be an experience now rather than just somewhere to lay your head.
So amenity packages, amenities changing as well?
Oh, definitely. I'm going to go back to the Wave Hotel again. They have their outdoor space is actually an art garden. It's really lovely. It's big pieces of artwork and big, huge palm trees, and it's a really beautiful space. There's a new hotel up by UCF called the Celeste. If you're familiar with that property, that's lovely too. They have a huge outdoor space, and I think everybody's getting used to that because of the pandemic. Everybody wants more outdoor space. So balconies are bigger, outdoor spaces are bigger, places where you can, hang out and socialize are bigger and wider and taller. So that's definitely a change we're seeing too.
Of interest both to our county guests here and certainly this market is the convention business is so huge here. What do you see as far as that coming back, and will there be a potential change in things that your association's seeing?
Well, of course, during the pandemic, obviously Orange County Convention Center is the jewel of iDrive, and a huge amount of tourism dollars comes in because of, I call it OC3, Orange County Convention Center. And I don't know if a lot of people know that there's a lot of impact between the airport and OC3 on the dollars that come into our area. So the theme parks are impacted by the convention business too, not just hotels and restaurants, because a lot of big companies will do their after parties at Universal Studios, or they'll have an event at Disney World. So everything's impacted by that convention services business. It's not back yet. It's going to take a little time, I believe. A lot of companies have come up with virtual trade shows, and it saves money. You don't have to travel. You don't have to do hotel rooms. You don't have to worry about the liability of COVID and other illnesses. It will come back because people do want to meet in person. People do want to get back together. They do want to be, engaged like this. It's amazing to see all these people. A year ago, we weren't together, and it's nice to have everybody back together again. So the convention services business, convention center will come back. It's just going to take a little bit of time.
Mm-hmm. How about the impact on the hotel business with Airbnb and short-term rentals? What kind of impact has that had both here in a way and statewide and maybe nationally?
I'm going to need a cocktail for that one. Do we have a cocktail? That's a big topic for us, and mostly because our hoteliers are not pleased with the Airbnb situation, and that's mainly because the Airbnb is not under the same regulations that the hotels are under. They don't have to meet the same criteria that the hotels have to meet. And so obviously here in Orlando, you're seeing a lot of the big vacation homes being built with the 15 bedrooms, the 7 bedrooms, that will hold a whole family. And that's actually really appealing to our Brazilian and our European tourists because they want to be here for, 10 days, and staying at the Marriott for 10 days when you have 20 people can be a little expensive. If you're from Marriott, I apologize. So it's definitely a market for people, but it's a little bit harsh on the hotels because they're seeing now that they're going to have to reinvent themselves a little bit to kind of accommodate families in that same way. But they're a little annoyed by the fact that they don't have to meet the same criteria as the hotels do.
A little annoyed.
Yeah, I'm putting that very mildly. There's actually a lot of legislation going on in Tallahassee right now about that as well, just how that's going to play out. So we're watching.
Anything we should know about that you could give us a heads up on, a bill or something?
There are definitely bills being put into play, and that's all I'm saying.
Maybe be over a cocktail, everybody.
Over a cocktail. What time is the cocktail?
I think we have one more question, and I think our time's almost up. But one more question, which you're pulling stuff out of your very eloquent brain in your speech. And here's the thing, occupancy rates. We used to have just a nonstop great occupancy rate prior to 2019, and it had edged up ever since. What were the past 2 years like, and what's the projection? Can you give us a hint?
I'm going to tell you a sad story. I say this all the time. I tell this one all the time. When the pandemic was full on during the summer of 2020, I was on iDrive and I did an interview. I was supposed to meet a reporter from Fox down on iDrive. Like, let's do a conversation interview about what's happening with our hotels. I drove down International Drive that day. I was the only car on the road, literally the only car on the road. The Hyatt Regency across from OC3 was barricaded off. The Lowe's properties barricaded off. Everything was shut down and dark. Employees, I got calls from our hotel saying, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do today, Carrie. I had to let go of 3,000 people. And that was like an every Friday situation. People were being let go, and it was devastating. Almost emotionally devastating. So I did that interview standing in the middle of iDrive. It was almost like you were watching the zombie apocalypse happen in Central Florida. I stood alone on iDrive with no traffic. I couldn't believe this was where we were. And our hotels suffered greatly. Thankfully, there are brands that could maintain on next to no occupancy. But it was a struggle. There were a lot of really tough meetings between general managers and ownership groups of what are we going to do? We are losing $8 million a month just on utility bills, not to mention the heads and beds. So all that said, we've seen a lot of recouping of that right now. Occupancy rates are great overall. They're getting back to that really great, we're full, it's spring break, we're sold out. So we're really depending a lot on the leisure travel right now and not as much on the convention travel, which will come back. But we are recouping, and we're looking at probably 2024 being when everybody's seeing the recovery full force. They'll start seeing that financial recovery.
Well, I want to thank you and invite the audience. She suffered greatly the past few years, maybe more than most in this room. So cocktails abound for Carrie, and she'll be available for questions after in the cocktail hour. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you, Carrie and Dory. That was great. We've got our last and final panel now, and we've assembled an incredible group of people to talk about the Central Business District in Orlando, how COVID has impacted it, trends to look towards in the future based on those impacts and where we're at right now. Moderating that panel will be Stephanie Darden, the founder and CEO of Prismatic. And on the panel, we have Brooke Bonnet, who is the Department Director of the City of Orlando's Economic Development Department, Craig Usler, the owner and president of Usler Development Incorporated, and Chris Popple, the Vice President of Asset Management for the Southeast Region of Piedmont Office Realty Trust. Please welcome them to the stage.
Good afternoon, everybody. Raise your hand if you're ready for happy hour.
Yeah,
Oh, not that
it's hard to
many.
go last.
Well, we have we're going to make this, I think, upbeat, and look forward to just walking through a series of questions with everyone today. And so starting off, first question's going to be for Brooke.
Did you know?
You're first, ladies first. Are there any positive planning or development changes or initiatives, that were instigated, during the pandemic that you think may be sticking around? And what are some of those more unique initiatives?
Certainly. Thanks, Stephanie. So definitely the taking advantage of the outdoors. So we saw a lot of parklets pop up and outside, outdoor cafes. Obviously, the front yard project that the Dr. Phillips Center did. That's probably my phone that's doing that. Just toss it on the floor. And so we've heard an urging for those things to continue, and we certainly want to help make that happen. So you'll see some focus on that.
Excellent. All right, next up is going to be Craig. So Craig, looking back over the course of Creative Village's history, which at this point spans a decade, which really blows my mind, How has the development trajectory and land use plan changed from where you started to where you are today? And are there any of those changes underway that may have been catalyzed because of the pandemic?
Yeah, so if we would have been at ULI Emerging Trends 10 or 15 years ago, I mean, if you'd have said, make a bet on multifamily, and you could have projected whatever unit count you wanted to, and it would have been low by half. I mean, there was just no way to see this multifamily thing come into the scale that it's come at, and the amount of people that are living downtown and want to live downtown, it's the demand it's impossible to meet it. We can't we can't find sites. I mean, there's really no way for us to catch up. The deficit on the multifamily side is something that I can't even do the math about how we'll ever close. I mean, the demand is really off the charts. It speaks to the quality of life that we've created downtown and a lot of the community venues and everything. So that was a miss on Creative Village in the beginning. I mean, we've got several thousand units of multifamily in our plan, but we need several thousand more, and that doesn't even get you to where you want to be. I mean, we've got to continue to think about more density and more people close to transit and more people in the right location and everything. So, and now I'm scared that we don't even understand. We think we need a lot now, and I think we're probably still wrong. I mean, a lot of the trends you heard about today would point to the fact that, you know, the idea of renter by choice and having the money to rent and everything is really, I think, just being understood, and the full range of products instead of just building traditional apartments. So I'm still worried that we think we're understanding we need a lot more, and I don't even know that we know what that real number is. So that's sort of the main idea, is how do you recalibrate a central, which we're not going to call a central business district anymore. I mean, that's the idea that it's a business district is sort of over, but it's an in-town neighborhood that just happens to be a real dense and real consolidated neighborhood that's tremendously impactful based on its population and the amount of businesses it has. So that's how I see it, and we got to figure out how to get the zoning and everything to work in that regard. But
Okay. Chris, on the commercial real estate side, you know, when you're from Piedmont's perspective, you know, is your focus on filling vacant space or investing in new development?
Well, I got to say, I was really excited to hear what Craig's favorite dish at the Monroe was going to be.
I know.
So, but
Happy hour conversation.
we skipped those icebreakers. Right now, our focus is on filling vacant space. I mean, we just took down 222 South Orange Avenue, the former SOAB building, 130,000 square feet of opportunity, combined with the lower stack at our 200 South Orange Tower. I mean, we have north of 200,000 square feet that we have to fill. And so our philosophy is you don't want to be an owner of commodity space. You want to amenitize the assets, and you want to provide people with a reason to come into the office and build that sense of community that I think has been talked about by virtually every panelist today. So really that's our focus, is on creating the best existing office environment we can. That's not to say that we aren't bullish long-term on development. I mean, we have a great piece of dirt up in Lake Mary, but for now we're focused on existing vacancy.
Okay. All right. Brooke, what are the most interesting trends and shifts that you're seeing right now?
I don't know if it's interesting so much as it is just the unknown, you know, this wait and see of wondering how many people are coming back to work, you know, in person. So when we think about, you know, downtown as a place that we want, you know, people to be, in order to have the eateries and in order for your favorite sandwich shop to survive, people have to be physically there. And so, you know, I think the commitment by employers to ensure that, you know, a piece of their workforce is actually physically coming back to work ultimately makes a difference for the health and vibrancy of our downtown core. So I don't know that it's so much as a shift as much as it is a fear of whether or not, you know, we're going to start to see the feet on the street that we had, you know, prior to the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, Craig, what kind of interest are you seeing from office users, retailers, hotel, and apartment developers?
So the apartment piece is obvious. We almost don't need to talk about it. The apartment interest is off the chart. It will continue to be. All the forecasts are, as I said, sort of this deficit of units and whatnot, and that's going to continue to be robust. It's more interesting to think about hotel and office because those are the pieces that you might think aren't there. They really are there. If you're in the market right now trying to get a new project financed for hotel or office, you can do it. The hotel market will bet on the come. The 2024, 2025, the fundamentals are tremendously strong for hotels because you have a limited supply now for the past several years, right? So kind of the same with office. Chris and me and all, we got to fill some of our space, but I mean, then when you look at what the pipeline's been, especially if you're going to build brand new, and brand new is going to have balconies and no-touch doors and HVAC systems that are better than everybody else, then you're going to win because new is going to win at least a percentage of the business, right? So we're bullish on both hotel and office, but you sort of wouldn't know it, right? Everybody's written those property types off, but at least in our world, in the pre-development world, those markets are being well received, and there's activity. If you talk to an office broker, they're as busy as they've been. It has to do with downsizing and relocating and right-sizing and flex work and hybrid. That's why there's movement, but movement's movement. I mean, that's what creates new deals, and that's what fills up space. So I'm excited about what office and hospitality especially can look like. Downtown Orlando is still under hoteled from a choice standpoint and a lot of older products, so we're excited about some of the opportunities there. And then to Brooks' point, we might have to think about how a downtown's more well-rounded so we can support some of the stuff we want. Because 70,000, 80,000 office workers who all work a fixed schedule, a 8:30 to 5 schedule, that's not going to bounce back. I think we might bounce back to the number of workers, but they'll be in a much more flexible environment where they're not all there at one time. That's not bad. They still pay rent, and they need more space per worker these days. So it doesn't mean we can't figure out office. So I don't want anybody to think that the death of the office market has been greatly exaggerated. And I don't think we're bullish on office long term. And then hospitality, same way. Hotels are, if business travel does come back, could be better off than in the aggregate than ever before. We're really at pre-pandemic levels right now, and the hotels we're involved in, with no business travel. So I mean, you would say that business travel is just going to be business and convention travel is icing on the cake.
Mm-hmm. I will say, I think it was last weekend, a colleague in town, and just seeing there were no hotels downtown available.
And this is true on the restaurant side too. So we haven't talked about restaurant side too, but restaurant volume at all of our restaurants is up. A record year last year at all 4 restaurants were involved in downtown Orlando, and so that doesn't compute. I mean, if offices are empty and hotels supposedly are down and whatever, so why is that? Well, lo and behold, people still eat. And so you just have to sort of figure out how to rearrange what's going on, but I still think you can get a as good or better result than we've ever gotten.
Chris, I'm going to combine a couple of questions for you. First part is, when do you think the market will be able to support new development? And then continuing on from that is, do you anticipate new office formats being substantially different than the current configurations?
So on the new development side, I think, the good news is that as 2022 began, the market experienced positive absorption. Vacancy stabilized. Asking rates were relatively static, if not slightly increased. So it's really just going to be a matter of churning through the sublease space that's out there and then whittling down that vacancy rate, pushing rental rates up so that we can support new construction. But, as Craig said, there's a lot of tenants in the market right now. I mean, we're as busy as we've ever been. Right now, I think I probably have hundreds of thousands of feet of proposals outstanding, probably 50,000 square feet of leases outstanding. So the activity's there. And in terms of the format, I think the big takeaway is flexibility. I think the office is going to be reimagined. It's going to be a place for collaboration. It's maybe not as many cubes or offices, but it's where teams come together and foster that creativity that you miss on Zoom, or the relationships that you miss on Zoom.
Okay. So Brooke, looking ahead, what would you say are going to be the main focus areas for the city of Orlando?
So it's an exciting time. I think a couple of speakers have talked about us being at a crossroads, and we really are, specifically for downtown Orlando. We've seen tremendous growth and great opportunities within our Main Street districts, and those have really emerged as a lot of the places with the character and just the uniqueness that we all enjoy. And those are the places when we travel to other cities, we want to see where the locals hang out. But as it relates to downtown Orlando, we're going through an evolution, and As part of that, and at my heart, I'm a planner, so planners love studies, and we're in the process of a master planning effort for downtown Orlando. And why that's important is because we need to look ahead, what the next 50 years look like. And that means that I don't know this to be for, certain, but maybe some of the streets that have been one-way streets would be better off being two-way. Maybe I know, I don't need to say, well, everybody else wants one, so we're going to get one. The limo lanes. Limo served us, at a point in a time that made sense, but limo as we know it as a bus rapid transit system, is that the best use of that space? Other cities are looking at cycle tracks, where you've got dedicated lanes for scooters and cyclists and things like that. And then the other piece of it really is focusing on the pedestrian experience within downtown Orlando, and also the mix of uses. We want a downtown that we all want to come to and bring our families to, and our loved ones to, et cetera, all day, every day. And it shouldn't be a downtown that, when 7 p.m. rolls around, that, we all don't necessarily, want to be there. So we've got to balance out. The bars and nightclubs are important, and they play an important role in our entertainment industry, but we've got to balance that out with other uses that are other things that add the needed dynamic to downtown. That's tough because the bars and nightclubs will always be able to pay a higher, per square foot rent. And so that's where property owners, and this is my plea, that's where property owners come into play. Sometimes it's about making the choice that's right for the evolution of downtown in the long-term, future of our city versus the immediate bottom line. And that's tough when you're talking about somebody that could pay $80 a square foot versus, something far less than that. So,
Yeah.
But we want retail downtown, and we've got to figure out a way to make that happen.
Yeah. Craig, are you seeing the need to subsidize any uses to offset others that are in high demand when it comes to the apartment developments? And again, I think it's between thinking about it at Creative Village, but also your work at Health Village.
Yeah, so we've done it for a long time, really ever since my career started in Thornton Park in the mid-1990s. So we've always curated our retail in a way that we think adds value overall. To Brooks' point, we don't look at it as one space, we look at the overall neighborhood. But that is finally making its way to the national developer, right? The apartment folks are curating a much more robust food, beverage, lifestyle, health, and wellness type program. And you're going to continue to see that, offices too. And we'll end up subsidizing essentially restaurants and lifestyle and all so that you can get the office rent and all that you want. And it won't, and some of it will be services too. You got to be funny. The word retail is kind of funny, but what you really mean is that the dog place and the coffee shop and the beer place and the bike fix-it place and all. I mean, that's retail in the new world. It's not necessarily shopping for a shirt or whatever, but the idea of all that being curated in a way that it adds value to your overall mission, whether it's office space or a hotel or an apartment, is just going to be more prevalent. You're going to see more developers. Tavistock has done a good job with this lately about curating their own sort of lifestyle experience, and that's good news actually, because it means that you're taking a holistic view towards this instead of a standalone view. The bar restaurant thing is as bad as a standalone view because that one use can pay the most money for that one building. But if you can expand that view to a total district approach, that's the advantage we have at Creative Village. You can take uses that are for the community good, the civic good, like education or like retail, and you can subsidize that use. But with offset by apartments and office and some other things that make money, you can put it all together and it can work. If you only own one building and you got to answer to your lender and you got to charge the most money you can charge for rent, then you're kind of stuck. So I think that's part of the key is understanding which uses sort of benefit the other uses, how it all ties together as one sort of lifestyle thing, or maybe you want to call it an urban amenity package. And then couple on that with the investments we need the city to make. Brooks right on point about sort of it's time to invest in our public space and the way that we've invested in some of the venues and everything in the past. The city's already doing that with the master plan and Under Eye and a lot of things, Luminary Green at Creative Village. So that's the answer. We need to deliver on the answer, but that's where we're headed.
Yeah. All right, Chris. Piedmont's making big bets on people returning to the office. Can you share more with us on what's driving that and why you think Orlando is well positioned?
Sure. I mean, I think it goes down to relationships. You know, you want to sit next to the people you're working with. You want to foster those relationships. I mean, the Wall Street Journal had an article, I think it was yesterday, about folks entering the workforce who literally never met a coworker. I mean, think about that. It's wild. I personally moved to Atlanta for the job with Piedmont. I didn't know anyone in Atlanta, and through coworkers, I actually made valuable, friendships and social contacts and people that I still keep up with today. And so, that collaboration and that sense of community is not going anywhere. So again, I don't think the office is dead. I think it's different. And in terms of, why is Orlando positioned to capture that? I mean, first of all, we've heard about it all day, lower cost of living. Yes, it's getting more expensive, but I mean, I moved from Northern Virginia, I sold a house for $500 a foot and bought for $240. So it's, that math's pretty simple. And, no state income tax, you hear about that ad nauseum. I don't have a snow shovel anymore. So I mean, right? Like, these are pretty obvious things. And then, I think Orlando really, it's kind of shocking to say it's kind of a hidden gem. And what I mean by that is, you don't hear the stories of an Amazon, an Oracle, a Tesla, or anyone moving here like maybe you do with some of the peers. But, we've got an airport that is way above its class. I mean, the 7th busiest in the country right now. So you can get anywhere, which businesses value. Again, the low cost of living, the low cost of business. And, it's a smaller market, so call it 35 million square feet of office product. But there are new and exciting projects happening, whether it's in Lake Nona, whether it's downtown, whether it's Lake Mary. And it's, an easier place to build than, say, some of these Northeast markets or more constrained markets. And it's got great folks at the city.
I need a permit
You're off the expedited.
All right, Brooke, given the ability for many workers to live anywhere now, how has downtown fared in attracting new residents? And as you look ahead, what's that also look like? What's that continue to look like?
Great. It's crazy to be downtown now in the evenings and on the weekends, and just to look at the number of people walking dogs, right? I mean, and I think back to when I started working downtown over 20 years ago, and you would actually see a dog downtown, you'd be like, what is that?
Good point.
And so the residential growth downtown was a targeted initiative. You have to have residents downtown to have a strong downtown, and that brings then the grocery store and all these other things. So we're focused in on really creating a quality of life. And so to Craig's point, those amenities like the Under Eye Project, Luminary Green, the green spaces, what the pedestrian experience feels and looks like, it matters, because at the end of the day, if everything continues to or stays shifted at some level towards remote work. If somebody is remote working in California, we'd like for them to be able to live in Orlando, right? So there's a piece of that that makes a difference. And I think with UCF downtown, and we're seeing some changes there. It's to see college students downtown is a great thing. So we'll continue to focus on the things that they want to see happen.
All right. Craig, last question for you. Maybe.
You stand between them and drinks. So.
I know. What are the most important trends and shifts that you're paying attention to right now?
So the number one thing for me is we got to figure out, some of the stuff we've talked about today would be talked about anywhere. I mean, so at any major, if you were in Tampa at the ULI Trends Conference, I mean, they're facing pretty much the same sort of landscape, right? And everybody's going to talk about a lot of these same issues, urban this and that, and housing demand and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm always trying to think about all that's true and it's all a given, but what does Orlando do better? And ultimately, Chris and I would tell you we're in the sales business. I mean, we got to say, why here? Why downtown? Even if you're already in Orlando, to electronic arts, why downtown? And so we got a couple things going for us that I think are really positive. And that other cities don't have. So one is, and this is paraphrasing Mayor Dyer's approach, so Orlando's not done. We still have a lot of runway on what to do, And if you go to a Boston and New York, wherever that's fully built out over, you can't move the needle with a lot of the stuff we're working on. We're in the middle of a growth spurt where we can really make a lot of positive changes, legacy type changes, take the city from good to great, if you want to use that analogy. So I think that's exciting. I feel a sense of opportunity about that. And the second piece is the way we handle diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have a reputation nationally, again, largely driven to Mayor Dyer and Mayor Demings and the way we have handled things like the Pulse tragedy, but we have a distinct competitive advantage on the diversity, equity, inclusion piece. We have companies that seek that out. That's a very valuable corporate value for a lot of folks going forward, and it should be. And we can win there. Our openness and our attitude, our inclusion, the way that we welcome people from all over. You can come to Orlando, Chris, you can move to Orlando and do business immediately, and there's not these barriers to entries like there are in traditional old Northeast. It's a very fair and equitable city, and we should aspire to lead the country in that. So that's sort of my pitch on what I think we've got going just for us that I think we can own and really lean into going forward.
Okay. Chris, last question is, looking ahead and across the Southeast, how is Orlando stacking up?
So touching on what I just said briefly, I would say you need to look at maybe aspirational peers. That would be, an Atlanta or a Dallas. Those cities are hitting home runs left and right, and we're not there. But again, I think a Nashville is someone that, we should be comparing ourselves to, a Charlotte. And for me, I wish we would get some of the big wins that they have, whether that's, Truist or Oracle or Amazon. And so I think some of that's the messaging, right? Like UCF is a better school than UNC Charlotte. The airports are fairly comparable, but, the weather's better here. The tax situation in Florida is as good as it gets. So it's how do you get that message out? And I think some of it, in Nashville, it's the cool factor. People think Nashville is a cool place. Ivanhoe Village is pretty damn cool. That's, it's messaging. We were talking about Ivanhoe and all the places we like to go earlier today. So I think we're hitting singles and doubles, and one home run changes the perception of the entire region.
Very good point. Well, I think with that, it is happy hour. And I will say, if you grab Craig, you should ask him what his favorite thing on the menu at the Monroe is.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks everyone.